What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Lumix Live this week. We've got a bit more of a kind of similar to what we did last week. It's a bit more of a loose conversation discussing just video generals with Lumix cameras. So given a lot of the questions that I've been seeing, pop up in our comment section and, questions that I've been getting from different users across different platforms, I wanted to just take a little bit of time and actually just kind of start at the basics and kind of just grow from there with various different Lumix cameras. Whether you're using a point and shoot of our series for creating video, or you're someone who's seasoned and you're working with GH6 or S1H, we just want to kind of go through all of this and just have a general conversation and answer questions that people have about using Lumix cameras. So I've got my GH6 hooked up here, and I've got some demos and some cool things to show everybody, like what the description says, to walk through different features that we have across the cameras that make this easier for a lot of us to do. So throughout this stream, I did drop a poll at the beginning of the stream, so I see a bunch of people have already answered it, so that's awesome. I'm curious what everyone's level of video creation is, because it's easy for, I think, a lot of us to jump really far into the deep end on tech specs and features and techniques and stuff like that. But I know that there's a lot of users that are just getting into this or have some experience but want to learn a little bit more. So if you feel like you want to, drop an answer in that poll, and that can help us just kind of guide through this conversation as we go through. I'm seeing right now that there's a lot of people that are categorizing themselves as intermediate video creators, which is probably something I would consider myself as too. So if this is the first Lumix Live that you're joining, these are weekly broadcasts that we do at 2 p.m. Eastern time every Thursday at 2 p.m. on a huge different, kind of varying level of topics, whether we're doing interviews with people, whether we're talking, heavy into detailed tech specs or geeking out over gear, to even kind of these kind of more conversations where it's really just about the community and having a place where all of us can discuss and ask questions and get answers, but make it a place where you can ask an actual source. So ask Panasonic as a brand. Since I do work for Panasonic, you can ask us direct questions, and you don't have to necessarily wonder if the answer you get online is from someone who's guessing or giving their opinion on something. It's an answer directly from the source. So, so if you have a question throughout the stream, drop your question down in the chat by tagging at Lumix Cameras before it. It just helps me notice and see the question come through. And then, we can kind of go through that. Before we jump into that, I want to remind everybody about Lumix Pro Services, and I still do have my microphone set up, correct? Cool. Yes, we have Lumix Pro Services here in the US and in other countries as well. In the United States, we have two versions. We have the red tier and the platinum tier. Red is totally free. If you own a Lumix camera, get yourself registered on the free level, which is up on the screen. So like I said, it's totally free. Get yourself registered. But if you're someone who likes that extra level of attention for support, you can take a look at the Platinum membership. That gets you 20% off out of warranty repairs. You get 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways. You get an exclusive hotline if you prefer to speak to somebody instead of, kind of going through a chat or an email system. You also get a pretty cool welcome gift as well, which is still the Peak Design strap. So yeah, if you've got a lot of those, kind of wants and desires for that level of support, be sure to take a look at the Lumix Pro Service options available. If you're not joining us in the US, there are links down in the description where you can check out what's available in your region, and then what the requirements are for those different tiers, since each country typically has their own level of tier and stuff like that. So let's take a look at some of the questions that have come in, and we'll go from there. Pete says, good morning and afternoon, or good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Pete. Welcome everybody that's joining in. I see a lot of familiar faces. See, we have a first question that came in from Mike Andrews. What's the native ISO for GH6 in Vlog, and what's coming up in next firmware releases? So I can answer half of that question. The GH6 has technically 2 native ISOs when you're working in Vlog, and it's going to depend on whether or not you're using the dynamic range boost function. Right out of the box, with DR boost turned off, your native ISO for the GH6 in Vlog is 250, and then when you turn DR boost on, then it's locked at 2000 and higher. So slightly different than the way the S series works or a GH5S works, just because of the way that sensor is designed and the way it's using that dynamic range boost instead of a traditional dual gain or a dual native ISO system. As far as what's coming up in next firmware releases, even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to tell you. You'd have to wait for formal release or like an official press release for firmware updates and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, make sure to get subscribed and follow us on all the different other platforms too. So let's see here. Will there be new PDAF for an S-Line update? So we've stated in the past that we are evaluating all autofocus systems. As far as whether or not, a camera's going to include any of those different modes, I honestly don't know. But if you've seen the interviews with our director, Yamane-san, stuff like that is being evaluated. So at this point, I honestly have no answer for you. Let's see here. Follow-up question was, is there S5S? Nope, you just got the S5. That's the current camera. Secret City says, have you heard of AV1 for video? It's on YouTube already. It's a lower bitrate than H.264, H.265. It encodes at higher fidelity. Throw that codec in a GH or an S series camera and profit. With development and stuff like that, and I know we're starting out on the much higher end parts of these conversations, but we'll go back down into the basics in a little bit. AV1 encoding is definitely something I know that engineers are always looking at. New encoding options are always something that is evaluated. The biggest challenge with any kind of new codec or new compression style or new bitrate option that would be put into a camera, an actual recording device, is not necessarily, is this new and is this technically better? It's how is it handled from start to delivery? Are there editing solutions that are readily available for this, compression type or this file type? What's required outside of just capturing and then, kind of getting into the editing software? So a lot of people ask, why don't we do 422 10-bit in an HEVC compression? And a lot of that's because it's still not widely used for the editing side when it comes to acceleration. So yes, from what I've been told, M1 and M2 or whatever they're called now, the new MacBooks, they can support a 422 10-bit HEVC compression, but that's only a part of the market. You got to look at what is most widely, kind of usable in the real world. So even if that stuff's not deployed now, know that things like that are on the minds of engineers and looking to see, is it ready to be deployed yet? Or is it something that still needs time for the backbone to be there for the entire process of editing? So yes, we've heard of it. And I'm sure if people haven't looked at what AV1 is already, it's worth taking a look at. I know Linus Tech Tips just did a video talking about it and actually compared with the Intel Arc graphics cards. So it's a cool thing that's going to be coming down the line. I have no idea if it's something we're going to deploy or when it would be something that could be deployed in cameras. Let's see here. Rhett says, I know you can't say any specifics about future products, but can you explain the relationship between Lumix and Varicam? Are they the same or different now? I can talk about this easily. Varicam is a different division than Lumix. Varicam is our broadcast cinema division. So if you've been to us at shows like NAB, we kind of display together as Lumix and Panasonic because we are one Panasonic. It is one company. But the Varicam products are from a different group than the Lumix products are. So as far as, anything that's happening as far as with those cameras and the future of those cameras, I honestly don't know because it's not my group that I work with on our side. But know that there are a lot of synergies between the engineering teams and the development teams on the different cameras that we create. It's one of the reasons why Vlog is a shared profile between Varicam and the Lumix series of cameras as well. It's why when we created the GH5 and GH4, where we first released our Vlog L implementation, that's why it was designed the way it was, is that You know, if you look back, Vlog L, in any camera that has Vlog L, it is still full-blown Vlog. It is a Vlog profile. The difference is just how it interacts based on how much dynamic range a sensor has. That's why, like, the GH6 now is called Vlog, not Vlog L, because it reaches that magic number we need for dynamic range. But yeah, so the synergies there between the two brands, not brands, between the two product lines, it is there. But as far as anything is, development on a Varicam branded product, I wouldn't really know anything there. Let's see here. Martin, any feedback from your team regarding destination card slot and higher bit rates? I don't have any information yet from them on any of this stuff. Know that, like, even if I do get, some of these questions in, they're not always going to be able to be answered within a week. So unfortunately, I know, Martin, I think you've emailed me a couple of stuff, and I am looking into those emails, in the comments that are brought up on here. So as soon as I get information, I will bring it up and update everybody as well. Excuse me. Sorry. Let's see here. Where it says, I know it was said by someone at Panasonic that the S1H or the box cameras was the successor to the EVO 1. Is that an accurate statement? No, that's not an accurate statement. I don't know who would have said. I know that when Matt and I talk about the S1H, we point out that it's kind of like it's the highest end in the cinema line that we would have under the Lumix badging. So it would put it, obviously sensor size is bigger than EVA 1, or EVA 1, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So there's a number of differences there. It is a Lumix product. It is very heavily cinema oriented. But it's not really a replacement. The EVA 1 is more of an ENG style or a broadcast style camera or cinema style cameras, a lot of us would know them, than a mirrorless camera. So they're not really comparable in that sense. So yeah. And then same goes with the box camera. The box cameras are multicam application. Yes, they are cinema application as well. The port differences are really there. Those lines are really blurring these days. Let's see here. Let me answer a couple more questions and then we'll jump into some of the basics here, of working with Lumix cameras. What's the other question here? How does the ALC switch work on the XLR1? That is a good question. That's actually something I will have to actually look into, someone who's better on audio than I am, with the camera. But I know that the XLR1, for those that don't know, the XLR1 is the XLR adapter that you can use on a number of the Lumix cameras. This gives you a number of controls over what you'd have in the cameras, and allows you to run XLR audio into your device and have it injected right into the footage. So this becomes your converter, not the built-in preamps on the camera. All right, let's do one more question and then we will continue through here. Alan says, any idea why camera menu via live view would be unresponsive in Lumix Tether when reset of features are working okay? Example, focus and exposure. The first thing to look at, Alan, is do you have multiple cameras attached and do you have them all selected? Menu operation in Lumix Tether, you have to have only one camera selected for control, and that opens up your menu control. That's the most common thing that we find when someone asks us about that. Okay, Terrell, what's the best video settings for playback on YouTube or similar services? Okay, this is a perfect question to segue into the basics. So if you're new to creating video, and this may not be the frame in what you're asking about this question, but I'm going to get there, trust me. If you're new into working with Lumix cameras and you want to start creating video content, you want to be able to go the fastest way to getting into the delivery side of, putting your videos up on YouTube, on Facebook, Instagram, all those platforms. There are some things that you want to kind of keep in mind with what frame rates you shoot at, what bit rates you shoot at, and so on. A lot of people, if you are new to this and you just start doing, Google searches or you jump into Facebook forums, you'll find that you end up coming across a lot of people that have moderate to high level experience in working with these cameras. And a lot of times we forget that the basics of working with a camera doesn't really have to be that complicated when it comes to video. So with the Lumix cameras, I just jumped into my GH6 here. So with the Lumix cameras, the basic settings, so anybody that wants to be able to just shoot and send it right up onto YouTube and not necessarily worry too much about the editing side of this, the basics honestly are going to be, really come into the camera that you have, shooting either 1080 or 4K at 24 if you want more of that, I hate using this terminology, cinematic look as far as motion cadence goes. 30p or 60p if you want to do something that's much more in line with what an average consumer is going to be consuming on YouTube, since 30 and 60 frames per second are the dominant frame rates that are used on that platform. So pick the aspect, or not the aspect ratio, the resolution that you want to shoot at, whether that's C4K, UHD, or Full HD. And then make sure you're picking something that's relatively straightforward to load up. Many users, when you start working in and you don't necessarily want to go into the editing side of this, you'll have the temptation to shoot the highest possible quality, which would be 1080, or not 1080, would be 10-bit with 422, and depending on the type of content, whether you're going to do all intra or the long GOP compression. For most people, if you're going to load stuff direct to YouTube, shooting in 8-bit is actually fine. Though with cameras like the GH6, 8-bit's actually really hard to find. You have to go to the MP4 options to get even any of the 8-bit options there. But ultimately, you'd want to do something like 420 10-bit. So you'd want to use something like the HEVC compression options. They're going to be easier to work with for the most part in native OSs for computers that you work with. Typically, you'll be able to, for the most part, you can get the preview of the thumbnail. Most programs can open it. VLC player typically can work fine with HEVC files, as long as they're in 420 10-bit. And most computers that you can buy typically have the decoding needed to work with a 420 10-bit file. If you don't want to do 10-bit, work in 8-bit, it's going to be 420. Whether you're using MOV or MP4, I'd probably recommend shooting an MOV, even though the camera tells you that you need a higher performance computer for it. Most computers are pretty fine working with MOV, especially if you're just reviewing it. It's also more cross-compatible, whether you're using Mac OS or you're using a Windows-based computer. I think Linux is kind of agnostic in that. So once you have that kind of setup, YouTube direct uploads can take almost any of these files without really any problem. And I say almost any because there are some challenges I've noticed where you do get some image quality loss depending on the version you load, or how big the file is, or how long it takes to upload. But if you're going direct to YouTube, my best response is just shoot in 8-bit and make sure you get your colors right and the exposure correct. But the most important thing to think of with YouTube in particular is your luminance levels that you shoot that video at. If you create a video using the full range, so if you're in 10-bit, it's 0 to 1023, and then you take that file and put it right onto YouTube, anything that you have shot that is falling between 0 to 64 if you're in 10-bit, or 940 to 1023 on the high end, they're clipped on YouTube. From my experience, they're pretty much clipped across the board. They're varying levels of what you would consider clipped. I know that sounds a little odd, but for those that are really experienced in this, but that's the minutia of when you actually are more advanced in it. So typically make sure that you're using something that's closer to the broadcast range, which would be 64 to 940. Because at that point, it means that when you load that video onto YouTube, you're not all of a sudden going to see like really crushed shadows or really blown out highlights right away. So it makes it a lot easier when you're uploading. It's less work you have to deal with. If you're working in an editing solution and you're going to be bringing the files into software anyway, then you can shoot full range and then just remember that you have to actually conform it later on to the luminance range that your platform supports. A couple different options you can do there. The other kind of thing that I typically suggest with YouTube, and I'll do this from two levels, is if you're totally new to it and you just want to get content up, you don't really want to worry too much about the editing side, just capture in the Like 709 color profile. It's basically like a broadcast ready color profile to capture in, but know that you're not going to have a ton of flexibility in post to adjust, the tonality in it. Even if you're shooting in 10-bit, you do have more tone to work with, but it's designed as a standardized Rec. 709, so it's limited dynamic range for Rec. 709, and it's making it set up for that particular purpose. These live streams that we do, so Lumix Live, we broadcast these in like 709 color profile using my box camera into things like OBS, or I use Streamlabs now. And what that means is that what I see on my display here for, how dark my shirt is compared to the background here, it is exactly how I see it on my screen when I watch the playback on YouTube later. If I were to shoot this particular scenario, and actually I can see if I can do it now. If I were to change the color profile, and I'm going to do this once my Lumix Tether opens up. If I change the color profile that I'm shooting in right now, you'll see that you get a very dark looking image. So I'm going to go from like 709 right now to, I'm going to go to standard. So now we're shooting in standard. You see that you get really vibrant colors, so things pop more, but my shirt now just blends right into the background. So right into my chair. You see that you lose a lot of detail in my hair. My beard starts to lose detail here, and it just gets really crunchy. If you're someone who likes to shoot natural's a really good profile if you're going to be doing editing to the footage, but not necessarily as a direct to YouTube upload if you're using your exposure a little bit more visually. But again, this is why I typically prefer to recommend everybody to just shoot 709, because now that we're back in 709, you'll see that you get more definition between the background, or between, I keep calling it a background, my chair and my shoulders. You have a little bit more definition in things like my beard, my hair. The backgrounds aren't as vibrant and popping. So that's just something to keep in mind there. YouTube likes to have things very, unless you're sending it in as HDR, likes to have everything, very standard dynamic range, 709. That's going to get you some of the best look, unless you're doing the processing for it. So hopefully that answered your question. Hopefully that's a good baseline for someone who's just getting into this as well too. But the other thing, as far as like settings for playback on YouTube or similar services, that's also when you want to look at the different bit rates. Most platforms have their own recommendations for what bit rates you load videos up to. Live streaming is a little different. If you're doing live streaming, you got to look at your resolution versus what the bit rate that you're sending up as. We've recently adjusted to doing 4K live streaming, so we're live streaming in 4K 60p, which means that my bit rate has to be 25,000 kilobits, so 25 megabit. I think that's right. Yeah. So 25,000 kilobit for my upload, and that's based on the recommendations from YouTube, so that you get decent throughput and you can still keep the sharpness and things there. It also, with YouTube, you also want to think about what resolution you load the videos up on. If you're someone who's going to be shooting 1080p as your final delivery, you can actually get a better result by exporting out as 1440p and then loading it into YouTube that way, because you get to take advantage of their better compression, which also means that you need to use higher bitrate for your export, because it uses the newer platform. So a lot of these tricks are what you'll find if you go right to YouTube's support page. That'll explain, like, when you're shooting this resolution, use this bitrate, and this is where, like, it goes to, like, I forget what I think AV1, like we were talking about before, the higher resolution and the higher bitrate you go, you start switching into these different delivery compressions, and they produce much better image quality too. So let's see here. Again, YouTube comments jumped. So that's ALC. That was that one. Okay, here we go. Rhett says, if you wanted frame rates, low light, IQ, dynamic range, would you personally go with the GH6 and something from the full frame line, or a GH6 and a GH5S combo? Personally, I would go GH6 as my, kind of more compact hybrid content creation tool, because I get that open gate, I get you know, the V-Log. I have DR boost when I want to use it. I got 4K 120 if I want to do slow motion work. And I can take advantage of that SSD recording with ProRes internal. And then as far as the second camera, the full frame option for me is going to be my S5. Those two cameras to me become probably some of the best to just work with. Because at that point I have my full frame. If I want to do, you know, shallow depth of field, really accentuate that. If I want to do something like this, I mean, I use the BS1H here so I can do shallow depth of field work. But between those two cameras, they're like, to me, the best. Your V-Log look is going to be very similar between the two cameras, so they're going to grade very easy together. The flexibility of the GH6 with, you know, unlimited recording, no thermal issues, none of that kind of stuff, and the fact that I can do ProRes internal and slap an SSD on the thing and have way better cost per gig ratio, definitely make it, you know, have a home in my bag. Yeah, so that's my choice. If the third thing that's actually not mentioned in your question, Rhett, is if I'm just starting out and I just want something that I can go create some just simple video with, it's actually going to be between two cameras. It's either going to be something like my LX100 Mark II, which I know a lot of people are probably looking at me going, but that's a photo-oriented camera, and yes, it is. But it's still a powerful video tool as well. Yeah, you don't get microphone inputs and stuff like that, but, you know, for casual shooting, a lot of that stuff, you don't really need to think too much about it. Just capturing moments and stuff like that's just as good on this as it is on pretty much any camera if it's a casual environment. Or I will go to my G100 if I want something that's got interchangeable lenses. And a lot of this stuff varies for me. Any day that I wake up, I could decide that I just want to change which camera I want to work with. So yeah, for anyone getting into this, an LX100 Mark II is an amazing camera to do casual video with, but know that you've also got a really cool retro, you know, kind of rangefinder style point and shoot, or a G100 if you want interchangeable. And that's not including things like, you know, the FZ cameras if you want ultra zoom, or ZS cameras or TZ cameras, depending on where you're from. If you want ultra zoom, ultra compact, smaller sensor cameras, any of them are going to be perfectly fine. The thing is with the point and shoots, you don't have things like 709 as color profile. So you would shoot things more in like natural or Cine D if it has it, as a good kind of like baseline that's, you know, upload ready. Let's see here. Andy says, I saw a sweet Peak Design Lumix backpack that was sent to a creator. Is there a way I can get one? I'm looking to buy a new backpack. You mean this one? Unfortunately, these are special edition that were provided to the team and some select creators, so I don't know if there's any chance that we're going to be selling them. And in fact, actually, I know that there's no chance that we would sell them. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a bit of a limited edition kind of thing. But yeah, it's just a black Peak Design bag. Outside of that, there's not really anything special other than it being labeled with Lumix on it. Let's see here. Rhett also says, can you confirm that base ISO and native ISO are usually the same term with Lumix cameras? No, they are not. Even in Lumix cameras, base ISO versus native ISO are not traditionally the same term. The reason why is that depending on where you come from in the photo video world, base ISO can typically just means the lowest ISO available on a camera. It's the base. It's the lowest one. Base ISO ignores the concept of balance between noise and dynamic range. Native ISO is a term that is specifically used to determine that the ISO that is chosen or used in a certain mode of operation is the best balance between noise and maximum dynamic range. So there is a difference between the two terms. They are, you know, kind of commonly interchanged between each other when they really probably shouldn't be. Because again, it depends on where you come from in the industry. I come from film where, you know, none of that really mattered. It was you just picked the ISO of the film that you used. So that was your native choice. But yeah, so in the Lumix world, when we say native ISO, know that that means that that is your balance, the proper balance between ISO noise, so the noise that an image creates with the because of the sensitivity, and the amount of dynamic range that's available at that, within that sensor. That'll be your best combination point. Base ISO is always going to be your lowest number, so that's where they will diverge. They kind of come together in cameras like the GH6 because of the way the sensor is. The fact that your lowest ISO outside of DR boost is also the base ISO, which is also the best performing for noise and dynamic range. That's why that's a bit interchangeable on the GH6. I know it's a fairly complicated point, or confusing point. Not really complicated. It's confusing for a lot of people. Let's see here. Tim says, looking for a Lumix ecosystem, so to speak, as well as more relationship with Blackmagic and B-Raw internal. Well, Blackmagic is a separate camera company, so there's not necessarily any kind of like relationship there within brands. But B-Raw is something that is supported, and that is something that, Blackmagic has the information from us. We got the information from Blackmagic so that it could be deployed, same as most camera manufacturers these days. And it's just another option available out there. But as far as ecosystem, like with our cameras, a lot of it, the concept of an ecosystem, I think, is evolving over the years. With Lumix, you look at probably the most important thing as far as like the abstract sense of an ecosystem is that the colors that you can get out of one camera are going to be very easy to match to the colors from another camera within the lineup, if not identical, generationally. Feature and spec-wise, you're starting to see a bit of a blurred line there. So GH series cameras are, always have been, massively feature-packed. Our G9 has crazy good video functionality for a camera that's designed primarily as stills in the Micro Four Thirds sense. And then when you go to cameras like the S5, being a very solid hybrid camera for a photographer and a videographer because of the fact that you can use those external HDMI recorders like the Video Assist or the Ninja 5, things like that. That's really, I think, the ecosystem concept, because lens mount isn't necessarily as big of a barrier these days anymore. Not to diminish, lens mount can be a barrier for some. But you have flexibility across the board as far as image goes, the end result you get from all the cameras. Let's see here. Mike says, if you output 422 10-bit video from the GH6 to a Ninja 5 and record H.265 into the Ninja, then you transcode the 265 to ProRes, do you lose any quality? Just on the process that you have to transcode things so much, yes. Yes, you are going to lose image quality. It may be imperceivable, but yes, you will lose image quality that way. Every time you have to do a transcode or a format change or anything, no matter what you're doing, you are going to cause some degradation, especially if you go from a heavily compressed format to a very low compression format. If you're using a camera like the GH6, hands down, if ProRes is the end format you want to be in, just get an SSD and shoot ProRes internally. It's going to be the best quality from sensor to storage. The other thing that you don't account for when you do transcoding like that, where you're going from 422 out with the H.265 being done in the Ninja to then converting to ProRes, is that there are levels of noise reduction that are done in video throughout all of those different steps. So you could be taking, the signal that comes from the camera that goes into the Ninja, and then in their creation of H.265, there's going to be some noise reduction applied. Then when you take it out of H.265 and put it back into ProRes, then you kind of run into a bit of a difference. ProRes typically has very little processing applied to it. So if you want to get the best quality out of the camera, ProRes internal 422 HQ is going to get you the best image quality out of it with the lowest amount of noise reduction applied to an image. The trade-off there means that you have to actually work a little bit harder on the file, so noise reduction, stuff like that in post. but that's kind of par for the course when you start working with ProRes as the file that you want to work with. So I would not recommend transcoding footage multiple times. If you're going to do it, you do it once, or you work in proxies. And, if your computer can't handle the native file that it comes out as, work in proxies and then just use that native file as the export to apply everything to. Let's see here. Dave says, would it be possible for a future firmware update to Lumix cameras to allow baked-in Luts for vlog? Could be useful if you need a quick turnaround and don't have the time spending editing footage. It's definitely a question that I know has been asked before, and I know a lot of us have asked internally about, is, being able to do what a lot of people commonly just call baked-in Luts. I honestly don't know if it's something that is doable or if it's something that's on the plan or anything like that. But know that it is something that we will bring up, because even for something like live streaming, if you wanted to be able to do live streaming from, say, like the GH5 Mark II, if I wanted to take that camera, use its live streaming functionality, but shoot in log and apply a LUT that I've designed because I like the way this looks for YouTube streaming, so I can take into account the compression issues and things like that, that would be a pretty solid, kind of addition for some of this, because you can have specific LUTs for different looks. So, that's something that we'll definitely bring up, Dave's Nature Production. I'm just going to call you Dave now. That's definitely something that we'll bring up and push further with the engineers, see if it's something that can be done. Emerald Audio Visuals. Are there plans to get GH6 Netflix certified? It's not up to us. That is and has always been up to Netflix. If Netflix wants to approve something on their partner list, that's up to them. Brands don't get say over that, despite what many keep trying to say. Brands don't have say over whether or not a camera makes it onto their list. It's totally up to Netflix. Let's see here. Where were we? Scholarhead, can we have an update on the S1 that will match all the display locks of the S5? Like, for example, colored mic volume levels. I don't know. I truthfully don't know if the S1 will get any more updates. And if it does, I honestly don't know when or, what would be included in them. But these kinds of comments that y'all leave in the chat, these are what our engineers see and our marketing team sees. So keep leaving the comments there. If there are things that you want to see, definitely let us know. It doesn't mean that they're all going to be accepted and always put in, but that's part of the purpose of this particular stream and this activity is I want all of you to have a platform where you can speak to us and get us your ideas and, honestly, and even in some cases, vent to us. If you've got challenges or issues, let us know in the comments, because the only way you build better products, the only way you build better experiences for all of us, for you, for me, for anyone that uses our cameras, is by letting us know and talking to us. I know that that's hard in a lot of places where you think, you'd want to go onto Facebook and put a comment there, which is fine. But if you do it in this chat, if you join us here, and if you let others know that this is a platform where you can speak directly to the brand, that is a much easier way for us to be able to collect this information and bring it to the teams that can actually affect change in the future of the cameras. Again, I make sure that I am very clear on this, that does not mean that everything you ask for will ever be done, because some of the stuff that people ask for, some of the stuff I've asked for, is just straight up impossible on cameras for reasons that many understand and many don't understand. But yeah, so unfortunately for the S1, I don't know, but keep letting us know. I know it may sound frustrating, but definitely let us know. Enrique, I know this is a video discussion, but Saturday I start with a portrait photography group. I plan on using the 50mm f1.8. What about the Sigma 45? No, yes, this is a video conversation, but the photo side's perfectly fine too. I like the 45mm f2.8. The thing that you'll notice between the 45 and our 50mm is that, one, our 50mm can go faster. So you can go to an f1.8, which means you're going to get a little bit shallower depth of field. And the close focus working sharpness is better on our lens than it is on the Sigma 45. But that's not saying that the Sigma's a bad lens. The Sigma's a great lens. I have one right off camera. I love using it. They're just different lenses. You're working with a contemporary lens, which pays very close attention to things like the way the bokeh looks, the, kind of aura of an image, versus the 51.8, which is going to give you a really nice sharp image, and it's going to be able to give you a faster, shallower depth of field. But for some, maybe you want the character instead of the ultra shallow depth of field. That's really a personal choice at that point. Know that the 50mm is going to actually focus faster, and it will be a little bit more responsive in the photo side, especially the photo side. So little differences there. But yeah, I have both of them. I use both of them. It just depends on the look and the feel you want to go for between them. So, sorry, I gotta make sure my voice doesn't die. Just coming back from losing my voice earlier. Let's see here. Martin says, on GH6, is there any reason why Cinelike D1 was not included? I have multiple cameras, Micro Four Thirds to share lenses, and Cinelike D2 doesn't match Cinelike D1 at all. Generational differences here. The GH6 using a totally brand new sensor and a new processor. There are profiles that just aren't always going to be carried over across the board, especially in the video side. When you look at how they're designed to mix across systems. The entire S series uses Cinelike D2, so pretty much every camera moving forward is going to be using Cinelike D2. And then who knows if Cinelike D3 comes down the line, if there's a change in the color science that way. I can understand that it's frustrating in some cases, but one of the things that I have seen some users do that have the same kind of challenge that you're running into, Martin, is they'll take Cinelike D2 or Cinelike D1 to basically say, I want to have these more as a neutral between each other. So if you like Cinelike D1 better, use something like a color checker and then create a profile or a LUT that is for your Cinelike D2, so that when you bring it into software, you can just apply that LUT and it'll conform it to the other style. That's what a lot of people do for, kind of naturalization LUTs or normalization LUTs for it. So let's see here. Juan says, quick question, is it possible to toggle record on an Atomos Ninja 5 from the shutter button in the camera? And also, is it possible to simultaneously record to an SSD in the camera and to a Ninja? Yes, it is. So one of the things that we did confirm, not last week, maybe it was last week, if you have your GH6 set up for SSD recording, you still do have an HDMI output. So you still can record to an external HDMI device as well. But if you want to be able to trigger that external recorder, there's a couple things you want to make sure you have set up in your camera. First of those is that you want to make sure that timecode is turned on and that you have HDMI timecode output turned on. So that's the first step. Make sure both of those are on. Then you want to come down to your HDMI rec output settings, which is under the settings menu, and then the HDMI rec output. You're going to come in here and you're going to turn HDMI recording control on. Once you do that, you're going to get in the top corner, the top left corner here, you see an HDMI with a pause icon next to it. Once you have that there and you plug an HDMI, like an Atomos Ninja 5 or 5 Plus into it, that is now sending the triggering information over HDMI. You just have to make sure that your monitor is set to take the triggering information from HDMI. Once you do that, you should be golden. You'll be able to just click the record button on the camera and it'll send the record trigger to the device you're working with. And it's triggered on timecode, so. Let's see here. Do you happen to know how compatibility tests of the T7 Shield... T7 Shield R with the GH6 goes. T5s are hard to get where I live. Yeah, T5s are very hard. I don't know if they're formally discontinued, but they are very hard to come by. T7 Shield testing is still underway. As soon as there is an update, which actually I'm glad you brought that up. As soon as there is an update for T7 Shield compatibility, it will be posted to this. The SSD compatibility will be applied or updated on the chart there. It is still under process, but just remember, just because we say that it's not validated does not mean that it's not necessarily going to work for you. Doesn't mean that it's blocked from working. It typically just means that there are anomalies that happen with the drive itself that may cause problems where you may get, write errors, or it may tell you that it's not fast enough or things like that. That's why we take a bit longer to actually validate drives that we want to work with, because of that fact that, we have to make sure that they work. If we're going to recommend them, we have to make sure that they work. Like right now I'm playing around because I use for my desktop the SanDisk Pro Blade system. I would love these to be validated personally. But stuff like that, we want so many things to be validated. It's a matter of, you have to methodically do these things and go through the process to validate them and make sure that they're going to work for you. So, at that point, it's kind of just a waiting game. The teams are doing the work. They're going through different SSD validations. Right now, the T7s are next up on the slate. So as soon as that gets updated, you'll be able to see it on the site. Let's see here. Martin, regarding your chair and shirt separation, wouldn't it be better to just adjust shadows +5 to get more stops of dynamic range in the shadow area? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the nice thing, is that there's not really any one correct way to do it, because for stuff like YouTube, it's all just really about how you want it to look. I don't necessarily need to be, maximum dynamic range possible in every single scene, because this is more informational. I'm not necessarily doing this so that, for my own vanity kind of thing, where I want everything to look ultra perfect. There are always things that you can do to make things better. If you lift the shadows, I'd be able to get a less contrasty look here. And you'd be able to separate this out. And you can do that in all of the color profiles. It just comes down to the level that you want to put into the process. At a base level, if you want a very simple turnkey for YouTube, just set it to like 709 and light your scene. I could easily just throw a little LED light underneath me, and that would visually lift the shadows up too. Juan says, is it possible to toggle recording on an okay, yeah, I did answer that one already. Let's see here. Will it be possible in the future updates to record OpenGate 5.8K in ProRes? I'm honestly not sure. It has been asked. I know I've asked it. I know Matt's asked it. A lot of us have asked it. I just don't know if it's something that's on the slate yet to come. So, let's see here. Use a GH6. Set the white balance using custom white balance and color checker passport video white card in front of the lens, which works. When I'm using longer lenses, I can't do that set white balance. How can I get good white balance in camera when using longer lenses when I can't put something white in front of the lens? That's a good question. And I don't have my thing over here. There are other things that you can use for doing white balance, like white cards that kind of go over the lens, like they're transparent. I've used one on the stream before. The other option is, it's not necessarily perfect, but if you're using, kind of anything as far as close enough light to the area that you're photographing in. So if you're doing nature and you're photographing at a long distance, if you're still under the same sun in the same direction, you can still set your white balance roughly based on the area you're at. Getting it 100% accurate is going to be a more challenging thing at ultra telephoto lens. But that's a common thing that everyone's going to run into with long telephoto lenses. If you're setting a custom white balance, it does get a little challenging. Using, what the heck is it called? Oh no, I do have it here. I do have the thing here. So using something like this is what I do. It's what is this thing called? An expo disc. It's a reflective reading though, or is it reflective or incident? I think I forget which one this one's called. It's been so long since I've looked at how light meters work too. I use one of these because I can put this over the lens. Light shines through it. It gives me a white point, and I can do the same thing. I can set white balance that way. I do this for my infrared shooting actually, with my S1R that's back there, the IR converted one. And it gets me right within the ballpark, within a couple hundred degrees Kelvin. So these can work really nice too. Again, that's called Expo Disc. It can work for longer telephotos, but just remember you're still reading from more close to the lens though. Let's see. On topic, is there a way to change which face to focus on if there are more faces detected on the G90 and the G100? If at all possible, I understand there are limitations. So I have looked into this. It depends on the mode that you're in. So with the cameras, when you're in the face and eye detection mode on the camera, if you have the box on the subject, if you tap on that box, you can change the eyes. It will change from left to right. If you're using any of the modes that are taking a base mode and then adding face and eye detection on it, you don't have an option to do that. If you want to change subjects, you would tap on the subject on the screen that you would want to have it change to, if there are multiple people in the scene. If you're on cameras that have, like if you're on the S5, you can do this on the S5 in the face, or like the human detection mode. With the joystick, you can change eyes, you can change bodies, that kind of thing, and what you're locked onto. It depends on which camera you're using. So yeah, it's a little bit of a difference between some of those there. Red says, free suggestion. Vlogging style camera with the retro controls and IBIS that would sell like crazy would be something you would like to see. So one thing I can tell you from being on this side of the industry for going on over 7 years now, retro vlogging style cameras like this, for vlogging like that, they sound like a really good idea. Not necessarily knocking the idea. I would love to see it. But that's the kind of thing that, you know, data has to actually say that would be something that would make sense. And most people, you know, if you want something retro designed and you want to do video, those things typically never go hand in hand with each other, just from usability. So, but you know, hey, definitely, you know, definitely keep asking questions like that. Rhett says, can we get some more specific info on base and native ISOs on Lumix, because there's some decent amount of confusion with some people. I think I answered that question for you, Rhett, already. Wow, I am far back in the chat. That would be why it looks like re-answering some of the questions here. Let's scroll down here. With all the Cinelike D talk, I have to bring it to your attention that the GH5 Mark II has some issues with the profile still. Hope this can be fixed even if I don't use it. The Cinelike D2 stuff, or the Cinelike D2 color profile in GH5 Mark II did have a firmware update that was provided by information that was provided from the community. If there are still specific issues, you do need to let us know. You can either, the fastest way to do that is actually letting your local support system know. So your local Panasonic support team, that's probably the fastest way to get information about that. If you still see some challenges with the, color profile for your particular style shooting. Yannick says, do you recommend attaching a top handle grip directly to the camera, or is a cage something you, can't work around? If you're going to be suspending the weight of a camera, I always recommend making sure that you put a cage on the camera. Hot shoes and cold shoe, or the hot shoe on cameras is relatively strong, and I say relatively strong. You don't want to, for a long period of time, put weight on that particular part of the camera. There are electronics involved in that port on the cameras, and there is a risk of potentially damaging them. So, if you are someone who likes to work with a top handle, just get a cage. There are options from companies like Small Rig that really aren't that expensive in the grand scheme of things with our cameras. I know, like, for my GH6 here, I'll show everybody with my GH6 here, I use the Small Rig cage, and it works great because I can have my SSD attached to it. If I want to put a top handle, I can, because it's got the proper attachments for it. Yeah, I highly recommend, if you want to be using a top handle, get a cage. It'll save you money in the long run of broken hot shoes. Let's see here. Scholarhead, are you going to make more stabilized LMount lenses? Don't forget Dual IS is amazing. As far as lens development and stuff like that goes, there are always new lenses being planned out and thought about and figured out, you know, what range we want to have them in. Some of the things to remember is, at least looking at it in a more like kind of close timeline, the 1.8 series lenses were a very specific design. The reason they don't have stabilization in this kind of series is that the, you know, most common use cases in these particular focal lengths that came out, Dual IS doesn't necessarily add as much benefit. So it works better to have, you know, under certain focal lengths, the in-body stabilization where you're going to get, you know, a really solid performance out of it, to get you nice and smooth work. Plus, a lot of the lenses we've been releasing recently, if you're looking at them from the video side, there is a lot of thought put into them about gimbal users. So being able to swap these lenses in and out, depending on what, you know, you're using a gimbal, you've got it balanced, whatever camera you're on. So as I change these lenses out, I don't have to rebalance the gimbal. So yeah, there are always lenses that are being, you know, kind of planned out and thought about. Dual IS is definitely always a thing that's being in consideration as to where it can give you the best benefit. Typically, wide-angle lenses usually don't have a benefit for a dual stabilization style system. At least not always have a marked benefit there. So, a couple, you know, just some differences in that case. So, new lenses for Micro Four Thirds. What lenses are you looking for? If you let us know, that helps us kind of figure out if we would, you know, add lenses to the assortment. The Micro Four Thirds system is a pretty well, you know, kind of fleshed out system. So it's hard to come out with new lenses that aren't just duplicates of others or not going ultra niche in the case. So the more that people let us know, the better it is for us to be able to kind of like figure out, you know, what works best. Let's see here. Are there differences between video recording with mode dial in photo mode, as in video versus video M mode? Yes, there are. There are big differences between using the photo modes to record video and the manual video mode. So one of the things is that if you are in a photo mode and you want to record video, one, you have to make sure that you set all of the options up beforehand. So if I come in here and I set my camera to, I changed the scene. So if I set my camera here, I'm going to go to aperture. Let's lower my, what was I going to do? Let me go to shutter speed. I'm going to lower my shutter speed. We'll go to something that, you know, we can see pretty easily here. Oh, it's because I'm in a different mode here. What's that? Well, let's do it this way. This will be easier to show. So if I'm in the photo mode and I want to create a video clip out of that, there's a couple things that you have to remember with the way the camera's going to operate. So one is that if I'm in the menu, and I have to remember where it is, because I rarely ever actually look for this. Here it is. So auto exposure in PAS and M. This is on by default, which means if I put the camera into PAS or M and I click the video record button, it's going to go to auto exposure, which means it ignores your ISO, it ignores your shutter speed. It's going to be an automatic exposure, which means you may not get the result that you want. If you turn this off and then go in there, it will use the exposure values that you're setting for your photography setup, which means you're going to have to make sure that you go in and you adjust them for video as well. You also have limited choice of what frame rates and aspect ratios you can shoot at when you're in the photo mode and what options you have, like, you know, for applying different tools. So in the photo modes, you don't get waveform. So you won't be able to use waveform to judge your exposure, even when you click the video record button. That's in a manual creative video mode. A lot of these things are separated out. So you do lose things when you're in the creative video, or when you're in the regular photo mode. That being said, it is also very easy to just be able to leave this in auto exposure, and just while you're shooting video, while you're capturing photos, if you just need an ultra quick video of something, just click the red record button. There's not really a need to overcomplicate certain things, especially if it's like, say, for social content, you want to load something up to the TikTok. I can't believe I just said it that way. If you want to load something up to like TikTok or Instagram stories or Reels, and you want to do some of these things really quickly, and you're not necessarily concerned about being on perfect shutter angle and all of this stuff, just click the red record button. It is truly as easy as that, and you'll have something ready to go for delivery right away for a platform that's going to compress it anyway. So let's see here. Martin says, what do you set your white balance to when you have to deal with indoor stage lighting with multiple temperatures all over the place? That is a challenge. Okay. Make sure I'm not losing my voice again, as I said before. If you're doing stage work and it is mixed lighting, if you have the opportunity, in a situation where maybe you have the opportunity to be there early and be able to photograph the stage while like rehearsal's going on or setup is going on, things like that, where they may be in the position where they're actually running the, stage, show ready lights. Literally a piece of white paper, in that scenario from a distance, if you're using telephoto, that can help. If you don't, it is just very hard. I'm sure there are some that have maybe a little bit more experience in shooting live stage, may have better recommendations for you, Martin. But most of the time, if it's going to be something that's, shot for stage, I get it as close as I can visually, because it's going to be usually close enough for most people. If it needs to be perfectly color accurate, that's where I think trying to get more involved with the production crew for the stage to kind of know what the color temperature of the lights are going to be, how they're going to be set, and kind of fixing just one Kelvin temperature that's kind of like right about in the middle. That might be an okay way to work with it. The other option is, and it's a big option, is you shoot a scene like that in raw video. So you get a camera that has the ability to record raw data out to like an Atomos Ninja or a Blackmagic, because you can adjust the white balance later like you can with a photo. The other option too is literally just take a photo, bring it into Lightroom, or whatever your editing software is, make sure it's raw, and actually color correct it as a still, and look at what values you're getting for tint, saturation, and the color temperature, and then just back those into a custom setting. That's another way you can do it. And it's not as fast, but it is another way that you can do it, especially with, stuff like what I typically do, if I'm out in the field, is I'll actually use wait for it to load up here. I'll actually use my Z Fold here, load the files in because I have a big enough screen that I can do quick edits to in RAW, and then I will edit those photos, get my white balance information, and then just go to the camera and plug in what that white balance was. Let's see here. My Life in Gaming says, was hoping that the synchro scan would be fixed for 4K 60 and 30p modes with the 2.2 firmware, but it's still bugged. Skips 59.9 to 60.3, but it still seems to be. So that has been brought up. I have to follow up and see what the engineering team has seen with that, as far as going from 59.9 to 60.3 in the 4K 60 and 30p modes. But you reminding me in the chat is perfect. I will follow up with our team and see if there is any update on that. Let's see here. Lens idea. The only real gap I see in Micro Four Thirds is Telephoto Pro lenses between 42.5 and 200. Leica lenses. Olympus has their 75mm, for example. That's a good point. Red also says, lens ideas for Micro Four Thirds. I also think more lenses in the f1.8, 1.7 zoom lens would be amazing. Can we get a 50 to 100? That would be a monster. It would be a gigantic lens. But we'll pass it on. Let's see here. Martin says, regarding color temperature, the challenge is that there are different color temperature lights being turned on and off throughout the performance, so I need something like a middle ground. Yeah. Shooting mixed lighting scenarios and stage performances, it's one of the reasons why I never enjoyed photographing or shooting video on a stage performance, like concerts and stuff. Because there's two trains of thought. At least there's a thought process that I have and how I want to do it is I want to pick the middle, a neutral color. So I want my color balance to be as neutral as possible, which typically I'm going to look at whatever the dominant, kind of resting color is. So between sets, say if it's a concert, between sets, I find like if the drummer in a band has like a white face on the drum kit, I'll try to do a quick white balance off of that. If I can't do it live, then I do it in post. And then however the colors lay out throughout the performance, especially in concerts where they use like, blue, red, green, all mixes of those colors, they just fall the way they fall at that point. It's a thing that I feel for those that have to do, any kind of scene where you don't have control over the color and the lighting because you are at the mercy of whatever just shows up. Let's see here. 50 to 100 would be great, complemented to the 10 to 25 and 25 to 50. Well, there is the 50 to 200. It's 2.8 to 4. It's just not a 1.7. But yeah, let's see here. FC says, my wish list lens is all around 14 to 140 lens in pro version, like constant 2.8. That would be a thing, yeah. Ultra long or kind of like all in one at an f2.8. It would still be relatively large in a Micro Four Thirds platform though too. Yeah, cool. All right, so one of the last things that I wanted to kind of mention with, kind of just talking about video in general with Lumix cameras, and really this kind of goes for any camera, is we often, this entire time we've been talking about the kind of the video side of this, the actual capturing, the how to set your camera up, what kind of modes you want to do, the white balance, all this stuff that we've been talking about. But there's another very important thing that a lot of people overlook, and that's audio. So things like your shotgun mic. Do you want to go with a shotgun mic? Do you want to go with something that's more, kind of, portable as far as, I'm going to do it on this camera because it's just easier to show. Do you want to go with a shotgun style mic? So something that's going to give you very directional, but still be able to pick up some of the ambient room. Do you want to go with a lavalier style system? In this case, I have the Rode Wireless Go 2s, which Rode was so gracious to send over to me. Actually, all the stuff Rode sent over to me. Or do you want to go with something where, where's my other thing? Here it is. Or do you want to go with something where you're going to be doing like higher end audio, where if you're on a GH6, you want to do 4-channel, where you've got, 2 channels in the XLR, which this is my other Sennheiser wireless lav system. I could have 2 channels plugged into the 3.5 millimeter on the GH6. I could have a 3rd channel and a 4th channel plugged in over this, and I could have 4 separate channels of audio input all through lavaliers. So audio, the point I'm getting at there is that audio is one of the things that a lot of people, I think, overlook when we're just kind of looking at this. Jeremy, yeah, it is not sponsored by Rode, but Rode did hook me up with some new microphones. I have a new mic for this as well. But there are so many different things that I think a lot of people forget. Even if you go to something as simple as... I have so much stuff on my desk here. Even if you go to something ultra simple as a tiny little microphone like this to get yourself off of the built-in camera microphones and into even some sort of like minor little shotgun style mic, you've got some really big flexibility that once you have the image quality down and how it is that you want it to look, you have to make sure that the audio sounds good too. If audio does not sound good, or it sounds crackly, or you're getting way more ambient noise than you'd want in an image, in a video clip, If you screw those things up, people will not really want to watch the footage. It could be the most beautiful thing in the world, but if it sounds bad, people don't watch. So where you do get limited is in cameras that don't have audio inputs, but there are pretty simple things you can do with that. I'm sure a lot of people have seen on, different platforms online, people will use their phones as a separate audio recorder because you can speak directly into it and then you can sync them later. Something as simple as literally just record your camera with its scratch audio, so just let it run its audio. Record a higher quality audio track through something like your phone. And then when you bring it into, if you're a Premiere user or most users, you can literally just drop those two things on the timeline, sync them, it'll sync them close enough audio-wise, and then just ditch the in-camera audio. That'll give you an infinite step up in image quality for whatever platform you're doing when you're shooting video with the cameras. So even if you have a camera that doesn't have external microphone, use another device to also capture secondary audio. That gives you a more isolated sound as well, and you will definitely get a massive improvement in that performance there. Let's see here. I will take a couple more questions, and I'm going to close off the stream today. Jesse says, can they add ProRes LT in addition to HQ422? I shoot for a long time. I shoot a lot of long form and love ProRes, but with LT, the file sizes are too large. But without LT, the file sizes are too large. Use LT a lot with my Ninja. This has been asked a couple of times, and the truth is the difference between 422 or between ProRes LT and our internal 422 10-bit is indistinguishable in file size and pretty much in quality as well. So at this point, I do not believe that we will be adding LT to the ProRes options in the camera. That doesn't mean that it will never happen, but at this point, I just do not believe that it's going to be coming right now. Especially because our internal 422 10-bit is pretty much the same as LT. And as far as quality goes, that's going to be up to you whether or not you think it's better than LT or not. There are a lot of independent people that really work. It is standard. Editing ability is a little bit different. Although I would be curious what you're editing on, Jesse. Because I can edit our 422 10-bit all-I in our camera on like a 7-year-old MacBook, and it works perfectly fine. But that's what I'm curious about as to where the big difference is in the editing. Desktop PCs and modern computers, I think it's less of a problem, but that's the kind of feedback that this is the exact platform for. If you've got that kind of commentary, let us know, whether it's here or in the email address that we have at the end of the stream. Alan says, feature request, 4-channel on BGH1 would be amazing. 4-channel requires additional hardware that the original box cameras don't have, unfortunately. Do they make microphones like zoom lenses, wide angle, like mic pickup, where there's a lot of ambient sound, and tele? There used to be a microphone that we sold. It was called the MS2, that if you put it in with the Lumix cameras up until the recent cameras, there was an option in the menu called Special Microphone that allowed you to change it. It's a shotgun, but it also has stereo pickup, and you were able to change the profile of that microphone depending on which parts it's using. I don't know of many that actually have ever done that, and I know that we kind of really don't do it that often anymore with the microphone, because most people across the board have just switched over to using lavaliers now. So it's kind of if the market buys them, then yeah, cool, they can sustain. If the market stops buying them, then it's not as big of a deal. So we'll take one more. Jake says, can you please summarize the changes that were made in the S-Series cameras with the latest Blackmagic update? Yeah, the latest Blackmagic update was you have more control and more accurate control over white balance. So with that update, up until recently, you had some control over white balance. And if I remember right, you still don't have like presets, or maybe you do. I don't work in Resolve that often. But what it did is the update gives you a much more accurate, true Kelvin of what the white balance was set at when you were recording. What that means, though, is that in some different programs, you may be getting a different readout. Like if you look at Premiere versus DaVinci, because DaVinci's going to be native with it, so that's what Blackmagic Raw was designed for, or it works best in. Final Cut and Premiere, I think now they're okay as long as you make sure that you update the plugins and update everything that's working with it. That's why you may see a slightly different read in the software than what you do on the camera, because of just how accurate the number is going to be in the software versus what is reported on the camera. The camera, if you look, is rated in, I think, 100 degree differences in Kelvin, where the software, when you actually load that file into Resolve, you'll see that it can go down to, I think, the tens for degree differences. Actually, no, I think it goes into the single digits. So that's what the update added for Blackmagic Raw. Okay, we are 15 minutes past the normal time that I would be ending this, so I do have to actually, unfortunately, end the stream today. So thank you all so much for this awesome conversation. I love just how active everyone gets, and the feedback we get, and the commentary, and the back and forth that y'all have, between each other in chat. This is exactly what I want this weekly stream to be. We will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I forget exactly what the topic is next week. It's been a crazy last 2 weeks, so I'm a little off on getting these formally scheduled up online. But yes, we will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, thank you all so much for jumping on here and joining the conversation. If you liked the content, if you like this conversation, please give us a like on the video. I don't typically like to just beg for likes and stuff like that, but if you did like this comment, I would highly appreciate a like and a subscribe to the channel. If you know someone that would actually like this content, or you think someone that would benefit from being part of this, let them know about these streams. Like we said, we've got an entire back catalog, and we do these every Thursday. So if you know people that would benefit from this, let them know. The more we can get in this, the merrier we'll all be, the better our community is going to be. And yeah, so with that, have an awesome day and an awesome weekend, everybody. I look forward to coming back next Thursday, 2 p.m. and doing this all over again next week. So take care. Have a good weekend. Later.